Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Vivid Voltage, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code Omnipoke. For today's new Vivid Voltage deck, we are going to be looking at a pretty interesting rogue archetype based around Clefairy and Clefable, and this is enabled entirely through a new Memory Capsule tool card. It's the only new card in the deck, but it is completely opening up the door for this deck to work in the first place. I'm kind of worried about this deck, to be honest, because it gives me a throwback to Cosmic Eclipse when I created a deck, Florgus Sawsbuck, which was an attacking deck that was hit and run and would loop Lillie's Pokédoll over and over again infinitely, basically. And that was an innocent enough deck, but it basically led us on the path to building Florgus Dolls, the controlling sort of milling archetype. I fear that the deck that I've shown you today is only going to be rogue and has some obvious bad matchups, but it could lead us onto the path of creating another very awkward, potentially toxic archetype. Let's get into the list. Starting off with the core concept, and that is that Memory Capsule is the card that was needed to make this a deck in the first place. Clefairy's attack was too expensive previously to loop over and over again, but now that we have Memory Capsule, we can evolve up into a Clefable, attach the Memory Capsule, and then also attach a triple acceleration, meaning that we can do this every single turn if need be, to do a 60 damage prod and also throw a Lillie's Pokédoll into the active, which is pretty cool. And the main power behind this is not only that you're putting dolls into the active, denying prize cards, it's that you're able to reuse Clefable's ability. Prankish is an ability that says you can remove an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon and put it on top of their deck. So being able to recover a Clefable turn by turn to your hand means that the following turn you can evolve again and do another Prankish. So you're constantly, essentially, having a Crushing Hammer Heads effect every single turn, but it's kind of better for you because you're also putting that energy back on top of the opponent's deck, so they're guaranteed to draw a brick, essentially. They're not getting out of a supporter lock or something like that as well. So it's really awkward to deal with. Now, there are, it's a soft lock because people can attach to the bench, etc., but I really do think that looping this is going to cause a lot of decks, a lot of problems. So let's jump into this list. Starting off with the 4-4 line of Clefairy and Clefable. The Clefairy is from Cosmic Eclipse. It has that Doll Swap attack, as I mentioned, and that's the attack that we're going to be spamming the entire game. It does an innocent enough 60 damage, but you're able to put this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. If you do, you may play a Lillie's Pokédoll from your hand as your new active Pokemon. And that text is really important. You can still pick up your Clefable even without having a Pokédoll in your hand, which is really good because it then means we can have the Wall of Zamazenta V in here. We can also give up prize cards with Jirachis and Mew, etc., Pidgeottos if we have to, which can also help towards our stamp game plan as well. So I really do like this. It means that also, if, of course, you run out of dolls, you can still continue to use the doll swap attack as well. So very, very good text, and that's what leads into the Clefable. We're going to be spamming this ability Prankish. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, during a turn you may put an energy attached to your opponent's active on top of their deck. Going to be a real headache for a lot of things. We've actually seen this Clefable kind of like low-key with scoop-up net combos with things like Dragapults recently, and it seems to have been effective against decks that need to attach multiple energy cards, and already I'm sure you can think of plenty of those. And here we're going to be spamming that ability every single turn of the game, pretty much. The rest of the Pokemon in the deck is going to be a 3-3 line of Pidgeotto. I'm preferring this to Cinccino because I don't actually feel that we have enough infiniteness in the deck to be milling ourselves more aggressively with the Cincinos. That said, we want to cycle with Airmail, but you're not actually having that painful discard. So we're going for the Pidgeotto. Hopefully it means we can recover from things like Marnies and Reset Stamps for our opponent's end, and we can recover things like Memory Capsule, Triple Acceleration Energy, Clefable, those sorts of cards, because you need to constantly find those. So Pidgeottos are going to be sat on the bench, airmailing throughout the entire game to make sure that we have a steady flow of those, which is always important. We also have 3 copies of Stellar Wish Jirachi. We're playing a high count of Capture Energy in the deck, which means that the 1 retreat cost Clefairy and Pidgeys, and even the Mew are really good to start out with. You can Capture Energy, find that Jirachi early, retreat straight into it. You're then protecting your Pidgeys, protecting your Clefairies, and getting also able to Stellar Wish towards more Ball Search cards and supporter cards. Obviously a very good deal. Similar to how Stellar Wish has found its way into previous control decks in the past, just for being extra draw power and protection of your core, draw engine in terms of Pidgeys, or your main attacker in terms of Clefairy. The Mew's in here because there are some awkward spreading decks in the format. There's obviously a bunch of hype around Telescopic Sight, and Inteleon in general is a scary archetype, so having Mew is going to be very helpful. Also, Pikarom, of course, is still around, so Mew is going to be good against all those sorts of things. And Zamazenta V is a nice walling option for a number of VMAXs. I think Dragapult would be one of those very awkward matchups because it's a one attachment attacking deck that has that shred attack. Having Zamazenta, of course, it does get hit by it, but it's going to be very tanky and slow for the Dragapult to start getting through you, so that's at least something to bear in mind. And it's more of a tank and more of a wall against the other VMAX decks out there as well, which is no bad thing. So we're going for the Zamazenta in here as a 1 count to really help out some of those VMAX matchups, which could be a little bit more awkward otherwise. Onto the trainers, I'm playing 1 copy of Palpad. Ultimately, I'd actually like more copies of this card. It's just the amount of space that we have available, because it's really important to cycle some supporters. We're obviously going to be one of these decks that looks to, make the game quite long and stretched out and try and get into this loop where we're using Prankish over and over again, where your opponent actually can't attack you anymore. They're just out of energy and they're only able to attach 1 per turn in a lot of decks. So having the Palpad to recover things like Boss's Orders, so you can remove energies from their new active Pokemon, getting back other Cynthia Caitlins, getting back Team Yell Grunts, those sorts of cards are really important. So I do like Palpad in here. I can certainly see there being a 2nd copy. Don't know the space to cut just yet. 2 copies of Reset Stamp. I do think there's going to be a time where either you run out of Pokédolls, or in those early turns you will be giving up prize cards. Whenever your opponent does have Boss's Orders, they're going to be looking to hit your Clefables and Clefairies. So we can then punish them later on by going for Stamp Jessie James plays and then also use a Prankish. That is essentially like using a Chip Ice Axe, because you're then forcing your opponent to only top deck a basic energy card or a special energy card, and that's basically the same as a Chip. They draw a blank essentially. They either attach that energy to the active and you can just Prankish again. They can attach to the bench, you can boss them and Prankish again, or they just hold it, pass into you, buy yourself a free turn to sort of re-establish your board and get more Prankishes down, more importantly. And at the same time, then they're still in top deck mode and just hoping to find a supporter that can go on indefinitely. So yeah, Stamp and Jessie James can be a real way for you to stabilize in the game, which is really important. Of course, you do want to play for Lillie's Pokédoll. It's going to stop the wave of pressure that people are going to be putting into you. And of course, it has amazing synergy with the Clefairies themselves, because it can come straight from the hand into play, which is awesome. 3 copies of Scoop Up Net to reuse those Clefables, mostly, and also pick up your Jirachis when need be, and pretty much pivot everything that you need to. 4 copies of Great and Quick Ball to access those birds as quickly as possible, as well as our main attackers. 2 copies of Air Balloon, playing this over U-turn board, because Zamazenta has a 2 retreat cost, but yeah, something there. And 3 copies of the new Memory Capsule tool card, which is really the thing that makes this deck work in the first place. You attach it to your Clefable, then it can copy the lower evolution Clefairy's attacks, and suddenly the deck is rolling. Onto the supporters. We're playing a few one-offs with the idea that Sinlin and Palpad can try and recover these. Brock's Grit being one. Like I said, people will be targeting your Clefables over and over again whenever they are gusting. Recovering those is going to be a really important thing here. 1 copy of Team Yell Grunt. We are prankishing all the time. So there are situations where you might want to do a Clefable as well as a Yell Grunt in the same turn, and you can remove multiple energy cards and again put your opponent out of reach of attacking you, which is really important. 1 copy of Birdkeeper for some extra switching options. We only play Scoop Up Nets and Air Balloons, so Birdkeeper being a reusable switch, whilst also drawing new cards and sometimes protecting Jirachi or using a second Jirachi can be a really nice deal there. 1 copy of Jessie James. Like I said, the Prankish ability acts very similarly to a Chip Ice Axe, so you can go Stamp Jessie James when your opponent's down to 2 prize cards remaining, and you can try then to Prankish immediately after, and you guarantee yourself a turn of Breathing Room most of the time. And you can try and reuse this with Sinlin as well, so you can put your opponent back in those situations again if they draw out of it with, like a second Reset Stamp, for example. So yeah, very disruptive and annoying supporter card there. 2 copies of Boss's Orders. This is actually a card that you will be looping with Sinlin quite a lot, as well as the Palpad, because your opponent will be attaching to the bench quite a lot, seeing as though they understand that a Prankish loop is happening. They will very much get the picture quite quickly. So trying to boss over and over again is going to be important to bring up new things into the active, force more switches out of them, which is already some sort of resource that you can try and whittle away, which is obviously very good for you. At the same time, you boss something, it's like you're doing a Yell Grunt on them, essentially, because you're bringing that to the active to then prankish those energies straight away. So that can also be very annoying. 3 copies of Bill's Analysis. I like this supporter a lot in the deck. Obviously, you're going to be looking to pick out ball search cards in these opening turns, looking to get Lillie's Pokedolls and Memory Capsules as well in those early turns. So I think he's super versatile, a very solid card. And yeah, he seems really good in here. You don't really want to be discarding too much in the deck, like I said. All of these one-off supporter cards are important in certain moments, and you don't really ever have the leeway to use the likes of Hapu, the likes of Research, with the card counts that we have here. So we're having to go for some more passive base draw, but Bill is still a big dig into the deck to cherry pick some nice pieces. 3 copies of Sinlin as well. I'm pretty close to trying to find a 4th space in the deck for this card, to be honest. Because again, similar to the Power Pad, I do really want to make more room for those to be even more infinite with our supporters. I find most often I'll be getting back Yell Grunts and Boss's Orders with the Sinlin. Always bear those in mind, because you always want to be following the energy with this deck. You're always trying to prankish to the point where they can't attack you anymore. That's kind of the whole deal here. Onto the energy, we're playing 3 copies of Triple Acceleration Energy. Obviously, we recycle these as well as the Memory Capsule every single time that you're attacking, because you're putting everything straight back into your hand. So you don't need to play more than 3 copies here. And we are playing 3 copies of Capped Energy as well, because it gets us, like I said, early access into Jirachis, early access into Pidgeys and Clefairies. All really important stuff, to be honest. Here's the full list now. Pause if you'd like, but it's always going to be in the description below. For tech options, there's a few things that I've certainly considered here. Supporter-based wise, I've definitely considered Oak Setup being a potential supporter here. I'm super skeptical since the supporter rule change of cards like this. It's only very good if you're going second and you get this on turn 1. And even with Jirachi, I don't think it's all that useful. We do have different types of like Jirachi, Pidgey, and Clefairy, so there's actually some good synergy going on there. But I don't think it's quite good enough. Basically, with a supporter rule change, if ever you're forced to go first or happen to go first, this is just like a wasted space, so I'm happier with the ball search cards. Lieutenant Surge is an interesting one. I think if I could make more space for 4th Sinlin, 2nd Power Pad, I'd certainly consider Lieutenant Surge. And if you're really, really concerned about Welder decks, you may be forced to play Lieutenant Surge on a higher count of Team Yell Grunt to actually run them out of Energy Acceleration, because the Prankishes only remove 1 at a time, and your opponent can, continue to welder to make sure that's not an issue. So that's something I have considered. Koga's Trap is another one that could be quite annoying. Force more switch outs from the opponent. It could get you to a point where you can just run them out of switch outs altogether, and then you can prankish loop them quite a lot. Obviously, you're dealing 60 damage, but against like tag teams and VMAXs and stuff, that could be a number of turns of you trapping and stalling them, basically, because you force them out of switch outs, and it could be a way of actually decking them, which is quite interesting. So yeah, that's on the table, and Koga's Trap in general can add to damage and just make life more awkward for the attacking Pokemon. It can try and protect your dolls on certain moments, so yeah, something to bear in mind. Pokemon-wise, Altaria can be an annoying wall, but I think now with Aegislash, I'm kind of put off this card. Galarian Stunfisk, similar to having Yell Grunts in the deck, can like double down on removing energy when people are attacking into you, which could be quite interesting. Persian using Make and Pay can again start targeting things like their switch outs, their boss's orders. Those sorts of cards are always ones that you're going to be fearful of, so Persian could be a decent 1/1 count in here if you want to get more disruptive. For attacking Pokemon, well, there's the Clefairy. There's a new Clefairy from this set that has the mini metronome attack. You flip a coin. If heads, choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks and use it as its attack. The reason why I haven't gone for this, because A, you'd have to split up your Clefairies, which is really worrying when you're not taking prizes very quickly with a deck. So if you only have like 2 Clefairies that are able to do the Doll Loop, you could get really, really punished if people are bossing you up. And if you prize any, it's going to be a huge issue. Also, Glimwood Tangle eats into like a lot of your spaces just to be able to have a decent chance of actually using Mini Metronome. So it could be a great way to get some burst damage in here, but I actually think it anti-synergizes with the deck more than it actually helps. Especially when we look at the matchup spread, I don't think Metronome is helping our most awkward matchups anyway, so I don't think it's all that worth it. Orbital VMAX is an interesting one. I've mentioned how much we like to boss things up in a stalling approach. I've mentioned how nice it is to boss things up to chase energy cards. Sometimes Eerie Beaming every single turn between, putting your Lily's Pokédoll back to the bottom of your deck, then moving into Orbital, then getting an Eerie Beam off, then going back into your Clefable. Could be a great way of spreading damage, speeding up your win condition, and especially against Luke Metal, where they can shut off your damage entirely, Orbeetle VMAX could be your actual damage win condition. Right now, our win con against Luke Metal is to deck out, not to run them out of... not to actually take knockouts for the most part, unless they're whiffing tools for some reason or whatever. So Orbeetle could give you an alternate win condition, or speed up your win condition damage-wise, because, you know, we're pretty pathetic with our damage at 60 base throughout the entire game, so yeah. Onto the matchup overview, I do think ADP is quite a difficult one. I'm sure none of you are surprised by this. You're taking multiple prize knockouts as you go around their dolls, and they play a ton of Gusting. Straight Eternatus, I think, is pretty free for you, but Poison Eternatus should be pretty difficult, seeing as though they can get through all your dolls quite quickly, just through the virtue of Poison alone, and you're only doing 60 a turn, so even if you are hitting their Galarian Slowbros and whatnot, they can retreat around quite easily and play around with that for quite a while. So it's going to take, you know, they're going to take so many prizes through the poison and get through so many dolls through the poison that the Prankish isn't really going to keep up, I would say. Both Centiskorch lists, I think, are going to be horrific as well. Not only because they have Welder, which can, you know, outrun the Prankish in certain situations. It can also accelerate to itself with its own attack. So you really need to get them to 0 and to be whiffing Welders like quite a lot for you to be comfortable. Even if that is the situation, then you're just hoping that like you have 2 Clefairies in play, waiting for them to Welder and attach and attack and get a 4th energy on board for you then to be like, okay, it's Yell Grunt and triple Prankish turn or something like that. Something really, really crazy for you to even have a chance against them. And at the moment, with no Lieutenant Surge in the deck, I don't see that being realistic. Maybe against other Welder decks, you will have a better time if you do add Surge and double Yell Grunt into the deck to try and spam those as well as many Prankishes as possible in one turn, but I do think it's going to be a little bit awkward for you, especially because we don't play any Stadium Bounce. They can quite easily, whenever we're Prankishing energies, they can just establish Giant Hearth, always be able to discard Fire Energies that we're putting back on top of their deck, so then the Centiskorch can like reattach it to itself to just continue to grow and, like I said, outrun Prankish, which is horrific. Luke Metalization, I think, is difficult. I think you can keep them from attacking you quite easily, and they only play a handful of Boss and Sinlins, so the dolls will be effective for a while. It's really down to trying to deck them out via them Intrepid Swording too often to actually try and hit you. I do think the fact that we're not doing much damage at all right now might force an Orbeetle into the deck to actually force them to act. Otherwise, it's not going to be an issue for them, I would say. And then basically the other bad matchups, well, Orbeetle has an ability that will just completely crush you. Zarude Rillaboom has a ton of energy acceleration, and then from there, it's just one energy attacking decks, which you really don't have much of a game plan against, because the whole Prankish loop isn't a worry for them, I would say. Colossal has acceleration as well as being a 1 energy attacking deck. Yes, you have Zamazenta, but they can always move into Galarian Farfetch'd, and because they're always attaching at least 1 energy, probably 2 energy against you each turn because of Colossal's own attack, they will eventually be able to get a Farfetch'd and get around Zamazenta as well. Attacking Excadrill, Cincino Garb, Whimsicott Tool Drop, Domfan, these are all annoying Pokemon that, you know, don't go down in one hit from you, obviously, and at the same time, they can be, you know, well, attacking Excadrill sometimes can play enough Recycle to boss lots of times against you. That could be an issue. Donphan Spiritomb can just attack through dolls very, very easily and continue to attack against you. Whimsicott and Cincino Garb as well. They're just going to have enough outs against your dolls, and they're not concerned about the energy removal at all. Excadrill Control as well, they're just going to out-infinite you for the most part, and your damage output is so weak against them that they just have so much time to beat you. Obviously, as well, they can try and target your hand and run you out of the 3 triple accelerations that you play, because they can do Stamp JJ, and they'll eventually get rid of your 3Cs, and you won't be able to attack them anymore, so that's the main problem there. Other matchups that I haven't put as an X, but things to be aware of. Dragapult Clefable is awkward. The Zamazenta only does so much. I also think Pikarom could be awkward if they play Vikavolt, because of course then you can't attach Memory Capsule, so you basically insta-lose when you see Vikavolt, so that's another thing to bear in mind. Outside of that, there are some more awkward options. Like, most Welder decks I think are awkward, but there's going to be a point where you can stamp Jessie James and do enough Prankishes that you like run their active out of attachments, and then they're kind of, it's based on how many outs they have left in their deck to actually like re-establish attackers against you and how defensive they can play. The Frostmoth decks, it feels like a similar note. You're going to eventually like trap stuff, run them out of energies on whatever they have, and it's down to them to play patiently with their hand, with you trying to do the 60 damage turn by turn, and how long it takes for that to rack up before they actually get back into attacking you and before they run you out of Pokedolls. I think the great thing about this deck is that even though you only play 4 dolls, your Prankish buys you enough. Like, it buys you so many turns that these dolls last like a long time. Each doll knockout is like a big victory for your opponent, basically, even though they're not taking prize cards. It's such a mission because there's so many turns that they take without attacking, even if they play any acceleration at all. So those are all things to bear in mind. But these are the main bad matchups, mostly 1 energy attacking decks. Obviously, if they play any item lock, that's horrific. And Center Scorch because it has so much acceleration on its own end. So my closing thoughts are that Clefable right now, it won't have too many close games. I think you pretty much get curb stomped by the matchups that I think are awkward. But if you're not against one of those, I think you have a really, really solid chance to beat those decks. And I think even with Stamp Jessie James and your opponent drawing like bricks for like 2 turns, it's enough for you to reestablish a board. It's enough for you to get a decent amount of damage into play on whatever they are trying to attack with. And if you've been doing that throughout the game anyway, just getting rid of their threats on that turn where you've done Reset Stamp Jessie James or whatever, it can really put them back for a long time. And even if they are trying to establish other threats by attaching to them turn by turn, you can continue to boss and bring them up and hit them again for 60. And then it's suddenly in the active position. They have to try and decide whether or not they have to, completely strand that guy, find more switch outs and start committing to more attackers on their bench, or if they, continue to attach to that active, knowing that it's going to get chipped away 60 damage per turn, and it could be, a number of turns until they draw out of this sort of situation. So I do think Clefable puts all sorts of decks in real headache situations, and I think it's going to be awkward. I do think this is still Rogue, like I said. Like, anything that has a bad ADP and a potentially bad Center Scorch is already like questionable in the format. Also lumping in that Luke Metal is a difficult matchup. That's on the rise, kind of, because of the coating Metal Energy as well. So certainly one that you're just going to see on the ladder, people trolling with it. But I think there's plenty of experimentation here as well. This is as far as I could get to it, but I'm sure there are more people out there who are willing to look at this archetype, who are way smarter at me at building controlling variants. Like I said at the start of the video, I innocently made Sawsbuck Florgust thinking that like looping Doll was cool for a hit and run style deck, and then it turned out that taking away attacking altogether was optimal for Florgust Dolls, and it just became a powerhouse, like a tier 1 archetype. And that could be the case here. I think whenever there's an infinite combo, especially an energy removal infinite combo, you really have to respect it and respect that there is something behind this sort of deck. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this archetype. Did you know it was a thing at all? Are you going to be experimenting with it? Do you think it's just, going to be one of those rogue tier decks that you see on the ladder every now and then, and it's pretty much entirely based on what you flip over at the start of the game, whether or not you can have fun against it, or whether you are just going to be sort of head slapping and hoping that you can get lucky against them? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in another video tomorrow. Cheers.